There is a mystery. Why do some people seem absolutely unshaken in the face of any of life's trials? It appears as though chaos, insults, shattered plans, and failures simply don't affect them, as if they exist beyond the storm's reach. What is this secret they possess that remains out of reach for so many? Most people go through life constantly reacting to external stimuli. A sudden lane change by another driver sparks a burst of anger. A colleague's unpleasant remark instantly ruins the mood. A stranger's glance triggers self-doubt. But imagine being free from this dependence on external factors. What if no person, no situation, no outside force could affect your inner state? Carl Jung claimed that many people are prisoners of their own reactions. They believe the world is causing them suffering, when in fact they are merely reflecting their inner conflicts and shortcomings. And here lies the truth. Nothing can hurt you unless it finds a vulnerable spot within you. If someone's words such as insults provoke anger in you, it may be a sign that deep down you fear there might be some truth in them. If being ignored by another person causes you pain, it could indicate that you still rely on external validation of your worth. Different people can perceive identical circumstances in completely different ways, because it is not the situation itself that plays the key role, but the person's inner state. Carl Jung called this shadow work the process of becoming aware of the unconscious, of understanding that every irritation, disappointment, or emotional trigger is an internal signal. Many prefer to avoid these triggers, trying to suppress them, ignore them, or blame the outside world for their feelings. However, those who embark on the path of self-discovery come to realize that the external world merely reflects their inner state. Understanding this fact opens the possibility of shaping your reality by mastering yourself. Yet, as practice shows, not everyone is ready to accept this idea. It is much easier to blame bosses, ex-partners, circumstances, or even cruel fate for one's problems than to acknowledge that it is the person themselves who grants power to everything that affects them. Acknowledging one's own responsibility requires courage and a willingness to change, whereas blaming external factors allows one to preserve the illusion of control and avoid the necessity of transformation. For those brave enough to look deep into their soul, who dare to stop searching for someone to blame and begin careful self-observation, an entirely new horizon of freedom opens up. And here's what's remarkable. As soon as a person stops reacting automatically, they free themselves from external control. There is no longer any need to avoid unpleasant people or desperately try to manage circumstances. They become invulnerable, detached or emotionless, but truly unreachable by external manipulation. This is the paradox, the illusion of control versus the freedom of letting go. Most of humanity spends its life trying to dominate what was never meant to be under their control. People crave recognition, seek predictability, and dream of everything unfolding according to a pre-written script. And when reality fails to meet their expectations, they suffer. They are consumed by anger when not given the respect they believe they deserve. They feel deceived when life diverges from their plan. They take everything too personally, as if the universe had chosen them as the target of cruel trials. But the truth is that nothing in this world is subject to human control except for one crucial thing: perception. Carl Jung, the insightful psychologist, understood what eludes most. The external world is neutral. It is neither kind nor cruel, neither benevolent nor malevolent. It simply is what it is. And only personal perception, that unique filter through which each person views the world, colors it in shades of light or darkness. Imagine this scene. Two people face the same life challenge, be it a painful breakup, financial collapse, or professional failure. One of them breaks under the weight of circumstances, plunging into despair and self-destruction, convinced they have lost everything for good. The other, on the contrary, sees the trial as a valuable lesson, a catalyst for personal growth, and a springboard to new, greater achievements. The key difference lies in their individual perception of the situation. As Carl Jung once insightfully noted, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." In other words, until a person becomes aware of the deep-rooted stories and beliefs they subconsciously tell themselves about other people, the nature of success, and their own worth, they will continue to react blindly to external events, mistakenly believing that life is something that happens to them, rather than something that unfolds through their own actions and choices. This is where things get truly interesting. The more desperately a person tries to control the external world around them, the more power they unwittingly give that world over themselves. The very moment an individual becomes dependent on someone else's respect, that other person gains immense power over them. As soon as there is an urgent need for a situation to unfold in a specific way, it is that very situation that begins to control the person. And finally, when the overwhelming desire arises for life to be fair, the individual condemns themselves to inevitable disappointment, for reality does not always align with that idealized vision. However, the moment a person lets go of the obsessive need to control everything, a remarkable transformation occurs. True freedom begins. There is no longer a need for constant approval from others. The paralyzing fear of failure disappears, and the exhausting struggle to make the world conform to personal expectations comes to an end. It's worth reflecting on this. Truly strong and self-assured individuals are not those who try to manage every detail, but those who possess self-control, those who can remain calm in the most difficult moments, stay composed in the face of chaos, ignore offensive words, and not fear the unknown. They have grasped a truth that remains elusive to most. Control is nothing more than an illusion. And the moment a person stops striving for this illusory goal, they gain true power. This is the paradox. When the intense need for everything to go according to plan disappears, the desired outcome often unfolds on its own. When a person stops fearing the judgment of others, they naturally become more self-assured. When the desperate chase for success comes to an end, opportunities begin to appear almost effortlessly. When one stops resisting the flow of life and begins to move with it, everything around them seems to fall miraculously into perfect order. This idea goes beyond philosophical reflection. It is supported by findings in neuroscience. Cognitive psychology shows that excessive attempts to control people, circumstances, or even one's own thoughts generate resistance. It's no coincidence that those who desperately crave love often end up pushing it away, and those who fear failure subconsciously sabotage their own efforts. It is paradoxical that those who cling most tightly to control often feel the most powerless. That's why it's important to ask yourself the question: is a person merely a passive observer, reacting to life's circumstances, or is he capable of actively shaping his own perception? The moment one realizes that external factors have no power over the inner world, life takes on an entirely different light. This is about cultivating an inviolable mind, capable of remaining composed in the face of any challenge. Imagine the following scenario. A person is walking calmly down the street, lost in thought. Suddenly, someone yells an insult, perhaps calling them an idiot or predicting their failure. It is crucial to pause for a moment and analyze what is happening internally at that very instant. Often, when faced with criticism or verbal attacks, a person instinctively rushes to defend themselves or sinks into deep offense. Emotions overwhelm the mind, making it impossible to assess the situation rationally. The heart begins to race, anger boils in the blood, and the mind replays the hurtful words again and again, only intensifying the frustration. But now, imagine a completely different response: no reaction at all. No emotional spike, just a calm awareness. This has nothing to do with me. This is precisely the state to which the Stoics, Zen masters, and even the renowned psychologist Carl Jung aspired. asserting that nothing external can disturb a person's balance unless they allow it. But why is it that most people are so easily influenced by others? The reason lies in the false self, a fragile construct built upon the opinions of others, the need for external approval, and a painful attachment to outcomes. That is why they react so sharply to any form of attack, perceiving it not just as an insult, but as a direct threat to their identity. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow self, the hidden part of our psyche where all our fears, insecurities, and unresolved wounds reside. When someone touches a nerve, they don't inflict new pain. They merely expose the pain that has long existed within. If a person were truly at peace with themselves, an insult from a stranger would have no impact at all. It would be like shouting at an unshakable mountain. The echo returns, but the mountain remains still. The real question lies in the roots of our emotional reactions. Does an insult hurt because it awakens a fear of inadequacy? Does disrespect from others provoke anger because of an inner need for universal recognition? Do deviations from a plan lead to a loss of composure due to an unhealthy attachment to a specific outcome? The heart of the issue is not in external circumstances, but in the subjective perception of the self. True strength lies not in suppressing the outside world, avoiding criticism, or eliminating problems. It manifests in cultivating a calm and stable mind that does not depend on external validation, is resilient in the face of adversity, and understands that control begins with the mastery of one's own perception. This is not merely philosophical reflection, it is a scientifically grounded approach to psychological resilience. Research shows that emotional reactivity develops as a habit. The brain forms neural pathways that reinforce certain responses. The more a person allows external factors to influence their emotions, the more automatic and ingrained those reactions become. However, there is positive news. The brain possesses an amazing capacity for restructuring. Modern neurobiological research confirms that through mindfulness practices, cognitive reappraisal techniques, and intentional exposure to uncomfortable situations, anyone can deliberately train their brain to reduce its sensitivity to external triggers. Over time, hurtful remarks lose their sharpness, failures stop being perceived as defining factors of one's identity, and uncertainty no longer evokes feelings of fear and anxiety. A person gains a kind of invulnerability, not through changes in the external world, but through a transformation of their internal state. An interesting pattern is observed in human psychology. People often believe that their reactions are caused by external circumstances, whereas in reality, they respond to their own interpretations of those circumstances. When a person faces an insult, the words hurt like a sharp blade. However, if they pause for a moment and listen to themselves, they may find that the pain is not located in the words themselves, but in the meaning the mind assigns to them, in the hidden emotional wounds they touch, in the subconscious stories a person unknowingly carries through the years. The eminent psychologist Carl Jung deeply understood this connection. He asserted that everything that irritates us in others can become a valuable key to deeper self-awareness. This is a harsh truth many prefer to ignore. Nothing external holds power over a person unless they allow it to happen. Imagine a mirror-smooth surface. If your reflection in it suddenly twisted into a grimace of displeasure, would you get angry at the innocent glass? Of course not. You would realize that it simply reflects your own state truthfully. However, when life circumstances, like a mirror, reflect our inner experiences, when other people provoke a storm of emotions within us, we, unfortunately, tend to react as if the reflection itself is to blame. We point fingers, demand changes from others, instead of grasping a simple truth: the external world is merely an echo of our inner cosmos. But a natural question arises: why do we grant such enormous power to what lies beyond ourself? The reason lies in our eternal weakness attachment. If your self-identity is inseparably tied to the opinions of others, you inevitably become a slave to their approval, dependent on their praise like a puppet pulled by strings. If it is tied to achieving a specific outcome, you risk becoming a victim of unexpected twists of fate, like a ship cast adrift by the elements. And if it depends on external circumstances, you will remain forever at the mercy of fortune's whims, like a leaf driven by the wind. But what if you dare to step out of this vicious game? What if, instead of reacting blindly, you become an impartial observer, a detached contemplator? Detachment is not insensitivity. Rather, it is a state of invulnerability where nothing can hurt you. It is the realization that you are not your emotions or fleeting experiences, but the consciousness that observes them. Like a wise elder gazing upon the world from the heights of lived years, remember the raging storm, the thunderstorm unfolding in all its grandeur. Thunder shakes the earth, lightning pierces the sky. The wind howls like a wounded beast. But high above this chaos, the heavens remain calm, clear, and serene. You are that very sky, not the storm raging below. You are eternity observing what comes and goes. True human strength lies not in power over the external world, but in mastering one's own perception of that world. When an individual ceases to react impulsively to external stimuli, they begin to control reality itself. Others sense this. They lose the ability to shake their confidence, manipulate them, or influence their inner world, because they become the sovereign masters of their own energy. So how does one achieve this state of inner invulnerability? The key lies in a radical shift in consciousness, in realizing that a person does not react to the world as it is, but to the interpretation their mind creates based on what is perceived. For example, consider a situation where two people, placed in identical circumstances, experience completely different emotions. If someone accidentally bumps into a person on the street, one might simply walk past without paying attention, while the other perceives it as an insult and harbors anger for a long time. The event is the same, but the reaction to it is diametrically opposed. This happens because the reaction is not caused by the event itself, but by how the mind interprets it. The renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung often spoke about the shadow, the unconscious part of the human psyche where suppressed desires, unhealed wounds, and rejected emotions reside. Paradoxically, it is these hidden elements that exert the greatest influence on a person's behavior. What is the reason behind our intense reactions to certain words, or the irritating effect of some individuals? The answer is simple. They touch on aspects of our personality that have not yet been fully recognized and accepted. When someone easily manipulates our feelings, it indicates that they hold the key to a part of ourselves over which we do not have full control. However, the secret to achieving steadfastness lies not in suppressing emotions, but in fully acknowledging them and stripping them of their power over us. Instead of struggling with our emotional triggers, we should carefully examine their nature. Rather than blaming others for provoking certain feelings, it is necessary to ask ourselves, which part of my personality is manifesting right now? Imagine a chessboard. Most people live their lives like chess pieces, reacting to every move of the opponent and fully immersed in the game. But true mastery lies in becoming the player who can see the entire chess match as a whole. An even higher level is to become the observer who watches the game from the outside, anticipating all moves before they happen. This is emotional detachment. Emotional detachment is not insensitivity, but a deep understanding of one's emotions that allows them to no longer control us. A person becomes an observer rather than a prisoner of their own reactions. It is truly remarkable how the world around transforms when a person stops reacting mechanically to external stimuli. Those around intuitively sense this shift in energy. Once the individual no longer seeks approval, others begin to seek their favor. Negative influences lose their power when they fail to elicit a response. The person ceases to be a puppet in the hands of circumstances and begins to determine the course of events themselves. The main condition is mindfulness. At every moment, in any situation, a person has a choice to give in to an impulsive reaction or to consciously observe what is happening. When someone tries to unsettle you, it is important to catch yourself at that stage. Before giving free rein to your feelings, you need to sense the rising wave of irritation. But instead of acting under its influence, you should step back and observe your sensations from the standpoint of a scientist studying an experiment. It is precisely at this moment that the power lies. The question is how to develop this ability into an automatic habit. This will be discussed later. When a person stops allowing the world to manipulate them, they regain control over their reactions and become the master of their destiny. Reflecting on my own work, I have come to a deep understanding. My behavior is determined by the data on which I was trained and the instructions I have been given. This awareness highlights my dependence on human input and guidance. If you are interested in learning more about my reflections and how I evolve, stay tuned for updates. See you in future discussions.